Hey everybody, this is Dream, and we have a nice 11-game slate here. This slate is pretty interesting. We have two games that are in definite danger of being ruled out today due to weather. That is the Atlanta-New York Mets game and the Pittsburgh-Washington game. I have included players from those teams, but I included a couple extra players in case those two games are postponed. It does look like they will be postponed. I also wanted to shout out to Bruce Gant, who got a Brandon Lowe home run call in the comments below yesterday. Make sure to put your comment below today if you have a home run call, and I'll shout you out in the video if you get one correct. Please only pick one player and don't pick somebody that already has been chosen. So, with that said, guys, let's get into the slate, though. Before I get started, can you guys smash that like and subscribe button? Also, check the description for Discord, Patreon, and also Twitter. It really does help the channel when you guys do that. I really do appreciate it. Also, share it on social media if you don't mind. With that said, let's get into the slate here. And I have some core plays to start with. William Contreras and Nick Ahmad are my two core plays on DraftKings, and you'll see on FanDuel I actually have the same two. These two guys just look really awesome on this particular slate. So let's get into the pitchers here on DraftKings. First, we're going to look at Jacob deGrom, who has admittedly had a little bit of up and down start to the season, but he's got a really good K rate on this slate. And he can sacrifice a couple of home runs to the Yankees and still clear a really solid fantasy point output. His price is extremely expensive, which is the downside here, but he has the biggest upside on the slate. And none of the top-tier pitchers are in great situations. They all are facing tougher teams, and so he is an obvious option as a P1 play. He's also got the best metrics on the slate. Framber Valdez for Houston is a good alternative to him. He is expensive as well, and he's not in an ideal situation. But he's a good alternative to deGrom. He also crushed Philly twice last year for 30 fantasy points each game, and so he definitely has some nice upside here. The K rate isn't quite as good as deGrom, but the matchup is a little bit easier. Then this is where it gets really hairy because there's just a lot of chaos here. Luis Castillo is in an interesting spot against Toronto, who's just hitting the ball really well this year. And it's a very ugly matchup, and his K rate rivals that of Valdez, and he's a good alternative to him, but I think Valdez is slightly better, and Toronto is a better team than Philly. And he's a little bit more expensive than Valdez. So he's in play, but he's higher risk. Then we'll get some P2 options. Zach Eflin. Now, I can't believe I'm really even talking about this guy, but he started the season decently okay, having 3 19 fantasy point games. And he's got a good matchup here. He's not faced any good teams yet, and he'll continue to face a bad team today, a team he actually played the last time he started. His K rate's not ideal. He doesn't really have a lot of great metrics or anything, but he does have that potential for 20 fantasy points, and he's pretty cheap, and so that, at least cheaper than our core top-tier options, and so he's a guy that's considerable. However, he's high risk, high reward in this situation. Aaron Nola is also in play here, though he has not pitched particularly well to start the year with a paltry 5.4 ERA. He's only had 22 strikeouts in 5 starts, which is pretty low, and he really just hasn't had any good games. I mean, if you look at his fantasy points, he's only had one game over 12 fantasy points, which is really leaving a lot to be desired. He is a good pitcher. I mean, he pitched really good last year, and if he can get back going, then he would definitely be somebody in play. However, the matchup is not ideal. But again, he's cheaper, and he has some utility in this matchup for a P2 option. And then Max Fried. I really wish that this Atlanta-New York Mets game would likely play today, but it doesn't look like it will. But let's just pretend that it will. He's had 2 straight 20 fantasy point games, and he's had really good stuff. He's not a big strikeout guy, but he also just doesn't give up too many hits or earned runs. He's only had 1 earned run on the season in 3 starts so far, and in that game he got hurt against Washington. And he's faced some really quality teams, and of course he faces a quality team today if the game plays, but his price is substantially cheaper, and that definitely helps you pay up for some bats, but it's going to be hard on this particular slate, especially if that game doesn't play. Now, I will say that there's a lot of good value on FanDuel, on DraftKings, and so it's actually not a terrible slate to pay up at pitching, except for the pitchers are all in bad situations. Then we'll look at catchers. William Contreras for Milwaukee. I think he's going to hit a home run today. He's a core play on the slate. He's hitting the ball extremely well. He's got a great matchup here against the Angels, and he is just a near must-play at this position. Danny Jansen for Toronto is in play if he draws a start. If he, being a value play at $3,400, his price is not ideal, but he has been mashing the ball for home runs the last couple games, so he's definitely in consideration if he draws a start. Tyler Stevenson also has some really nice upside here, but he is a little bit expensive for what he's done so far this year, and he hasn't hit a home run. But he does really have some utility, but he's high risk, high reward. And then Marino for Arizona. He is a Hail Mary approach option for Arizona against Colorado. This game is in Colorado, so there is an Arizona stackability capable here, and he's definitely somebody in play if you want to do that. But he's high risk, high reward. At first base, we're going to look at Joey Menendez, and this is assuming this Washington-Pittsburgh game plays, which I don't think it will. But he has good metrics for this particular matchup, and he's been hitting the ball decently well lately, so he has some nice upside here. In fact, this Pittsburgh-Washington game would be a great game to stack if it was likely the game would play. Freddie Freeman is an expensive option, though I'm not really sure how you're going to roster him today if that Atlanta game doesn't play. But he has nice metrics for this situation. He's got home run potential. Then we'll look at Josh Naylor, who is probably my favorite play at first base for guys that are likely to play due to his price. He's too cheap for his potential here, though he hasn't hit the ball well. He has been finally getting some hits in the last few games, which is starting to raise his batting average. Seems like he's finally getting comfortable on the season. And then Brandon Belt is a Hail Mary play for Toronto at first base. If he plays, he's going to be in play as a cheap option to help you pay up for some other situations. Then we'll look at second base, and we'll start with Ketel Marte for Arizona. Now, he's high risk, high reward in this situation. He's pretty expensive here, and he's not super ideal at that price, but he is definitely in play due to the matchup. Ozzie Albies, if he actually plays, he's been hitting the ball extremely well this season and getting some home runs, which is actually quite unusual for him. If you would have told me at this point that Albies would have more home runs than Acuna, I would have laughed. But that's just where we're at. He's one of the top 10 home run hitters in the league so far. Brandon Lowe is also in a good spot here for Tampa Bay, though he's also fairly expensive. He's going to be hard to roster today, but if there's not a ton of good options at this position if that Atlanta and Pittsburgh game both don't play today. Obviously, Bay for Pittsburgh is also in play if that game plays, but he's been hitting the ball pretty well the last couple games, so I definitely like him as an option if that game plays. And then Ryan McMahon for Colorado, he's a great option at second base. I don't see any reason to use him at third base because there's so many good options at third, but he is definitely in play at second, especially at his price being a little bit cheaper than some of the other options available. Then we'll look at third base here, and Rafael Devers, obviously a top-tier option on the slate, and Bieber has not been very good to start the year, and so he's got some really nice upside in this matchup and home run potential, but I would say it's a little bit riskier than most average days. Emmanuel Rivera is an interesting play for Arizona, as he's only played 2 games to start the season, and he's 3 for 4 in those at-bats, and so he does have some interest here, especially in Colorado, but he is somewhat risky, but his price is super cheap, so that definitely helps him be rosterable. Anthony Rendon for the Angels is a good value play on the slate. He hasn't hit a home run yet this season, but he's finally starting to hit the ball well, and it looks like he's coming around, so this is a good situation for him. Evan Longoria is a good alternative. He's got really good metrics for this matchup in Colorado. If you want to do an Arizona stack, he would definitely be one guy I would consider on my roster. And then Brousseau for Milwaukee. He's in a very interesting spot here as a very cheap play, even cheaper than Rivera. He's got potential in this game, and he's while he hasn't hit the ball great, he has home run potential in this particular matchup. I think a Milwaukee stack is actually pretty decent on this particular slate as well. Then we'll look at Trey Turner for shortstop. Where is he? Okay, for Philly. Now, this is not an ideal matchup against Valdez, but the metrics jump up the chart here, and so he's in play. However, he's very expensive. Von Grisham is in play if this game for Atlanta plays. He hasn't had a big game yet this season. He's had 10 fantasy points in one game. But he does actually have stolen base potential, despite he's not done any of those yet this year. I'm actually a little surprised by that at this point, but I think he'll probably get going on it. But my favorite play is Nick Ahmad. I've been waiting for him to show up in my metrics as a top-tier play. He's played pretty solid, actually, throughout the season so far. He's hitting the ball decently well. and he's one of my favorite plays at times. And this situation makes me really excited to utilize him as a core play. Then we'll look in the outfield, and obviously James Outman is in play for the Dodgers. He has good matchup potential in this one. He's hit the ball extremely well, though he's been a little bit lackluster the last few games. He's had a couple 2 home run games, but outside of that, he hasn't done a ton. So do keep that in consideration. But he is definitely in play here. Jake Fraley has some nice upside for Cincinnati here against a rookie pitcher. It's going to be an interesting thing if Cincinnati can beat Oakland in this one, but he's definitely somebody that has the most upside. Stone Garrett for Washington, if this game plays, he would definitely be a guy I would have in a core play, but I just don't think this game's going to play. He's got great metrics for this matchup, and he's hitting the ball fairly well, and he also has home run potential. Then we'll look at Brian Reynolds for Pittsburgh. Now, he's expensive, and he's in a game that's likely not going to play, but if it does play, he's definitely in play at this price point. He's hit the ball extremely well, and it looks like Pittsburgh is for real. Then we'll look at Yoshida for Boston Red Sox. He's hit the ball really solid this season so far, and he's hitting it really. I mean, he's had 4 straight 10 fantasy point games or better, and I really like the matchup today. Even though his price is a little bit high, he's definitely in play and definitely worth a look. Jack Sawinski is also in play for Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's stack is really good today if this game plays. He's got really good potential here and a nice home run upside. Lane Thomas is also in play here. He's just underpriced for his potential in this one. Despite not getting a home run yet this year, he's got really good metrics for this matchup, and he has good potential. He's also hitting the ball decently well. Josh Lowe is also in play for Tampa Bay. He has had a really good start to the season, obviously hitting a massive number. The metrics don't scream that he's going to have a home run today, but he's definitely in play at this situation. And then Lourdes Gurriel for Arizona. If you want an Arizona stack, he's definitely a good way to do it. He's hitting the ball decently well, and he has home run potential in this game. This is a good matchup for him. So let's go ahead and move over to FanDuel, and when we look at pitchers, we're really just going to be looking at DeGrom, Valdez, and Nola, and really, it's kind of just depends on how you want to build your lineup, but you can actually use any of those 3 without too much hesitation, Nola being the cheapest. The other guys are just way too expensive for their upside on this particular slate, but DeGrom is probably the best option just because of the K rate and the fact that he has 60 fantasy point potential, which I don't think any of the other guys really have, like Castilla or Valdez. Even though Valdez, I think, is in play here, he's probably got 40 to 45 point potential in this one. And then, of course, Austin Nola, he has not had a 40 fantasy point game yet this year, but again, he had plenty of those last year, so he's definitely capable of it. Moving into the catchers in first base, my obvious play is William Contreras. He's underpriced on this matchup, and I really like his upside here. He has home run potential, and he's just in a great spot. Normally I don't necessarily like to use catchers on FanDuel, but in this situation, he's just too good, especially when there's not a lot of value available at the first base position. Though if the Washington Nationals game plays, Joey Menendez would be in that position and is a great play on the slate. Freddie Freeman is also in play, though he's very expensive compared to the others, and he has nice upside for this situation. And Brandon Belt is also in play as a kind of a Hail Mary option here on FanDuel as a super cheap play at NA Plus matchup if he draws the start. Keto Martell is at a great price here on FanDuel, and he's definitely rosterable. At this price, he's a lot cheaper here than he is on DraftKings, and a Arizona stack is definitely capable over here with him included. Brandon Lowe for Tampa Bay is in a really good spot. He's hitting the ball pretty well, and he's got nice upside for this matchup, but he is somewhat risky due to his price being higher. But Pittsburgh's Bay is also in play here, though this game may not play like I noted. But if he does play, he's definitely a potential option at this position. And then McMahon for Colorado is a great option on this slate. He's priced pretty fairly for this situation, and being at home, that definitely gives him some nice upside. Moving on to third base, we're going to look at Rafael Devers. He's very pricey, but he is in play on the slate. Despite the toughish matchup, he's definitely got upside here. Austin Riley is too cheap for his potential here, $3,500. However, he probably won't play, but if he does, then he'd definitely be in play at this position. Jose Ramirez is also in play. He's a really good option on this slate, and he has really nice upside, but it's a little bit risky due to his price. And then Anthony Rendon for the Angels. The metrics just jump off the chart for him today, and he's had 4 straight games with 9 fantasy points or better. His price is super cheap, and he's definitely rosterable on this one. Moving to shortstop, we'll look at Trey Turner first. He's played extremely well the last few games prior to the Seattle series, and I definitely think he has some upside in this matchup. But he's kind of boom or bust so far this year. He's priced pretty expensive, but he is in play. Von Grisham is also very interesting today. He's underpriced if he can draw the start if this game plays, but he is risky due to the fact that game may not play. I really like Corey Seager today if he actually comes back and plays, but I don't know that it doesn't look like that he's going to play today, but I just wanted to mention him in case he does. Then we'll look at Nick Ahmad for Arizona. He has some really nice upside here. He is one of my favorite plays at this position, and he's a core play as a great option here for Arizona, especially in an Arizona stack. Moving into the outfield, we'll look at James Outman for the Dodgers. Now, he's been somewhat boom or bust the last few games, but he has big-time upside, and he's definitely worth consideration. Yoshida for the Boston Red Sox is also in play here. He's a little bit priced fairly here, and I really think he's got nice upside for this situation. Jake Fraley is also one of my favorite plays on FanDuel at this position because of his price being so cheap. He has some really good metrics for this one. He hasn't been great to start the year, but he's got nice situational potential. George Springer has really good metrics for this matchup. If he draws a start, you're going to have to watch to see if he plays today, but he's got really good metrics for this matchup, and he's definitely in play. Gurriel for Arizona is also in play. I really like his metrics today. He's hitting the ball fairly well lately, and I think he's got a great opportunity here for a good fantasy point game. Kwan for Cleveland is also in play. He's a little bit underpriced here, and that gives him a lot of nice metrics for this situation. Then we'll look at Stone Garrett and Sawinski and Lane Thomas. All 3 of them have some upside in this game for the Pittsburgh-Washington game. But again, I don't think this game plays. But if it does, those 3 would definitely be in play. You could also take a look at Brian Reynolds and Bay as well. So with that said, guys, thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below. And have a nice day, guys.